as much of an impact. And from an error perspective, it is typically human error at the beginning or intervention. They typically are characterized by very flat error processes. So just to give you sort of this context of a manual environment versus an automated, what we've seen and what I've personally seen in municipal government, what you see is that there is a time and a size for municipalities where manual processes make sense. They are actually cheaper. They are actually less error and pieces like that. The challenge in Alberta in the last decade or so, and I'm sure Canmore is no exception, is the growth and the increasing desire for things like automated services are pushing our volumes past the point where it makes sense for manual processes. And I think if we were going to just do a general characterization of where the town of Canmore is right now, is you're moving to that point where from a cost effectiveness, from a time service delivery, from an error rate piece, you're moving to the place where it makes more sense to continue to invest in automation of your processes. And this is just a general statement of the municipality. Tony's going to get into much more specific recommendations and findings that we found about your specific pieces of business. But I just wanted to set sort of as a groundwork where we come from for when we're doing these type of reviews and what we're seeing in other municipalities in the province. Are there any questions at this point?
Not at this time. Okay. Thank you.
So I'll turn it over to Tony and he can walk you through the methodology and what we found.
Thanks, Dave. Good afternoon. I'm the token IT guy, so I'll try and not nerd out on you too badly. It was interesting. I heard that there was an Apple charger required for something to be charged, and Alan didn't have one. And I said, I got one in my bag somewhere. I always have 3 of them, and I have none. I've given them all away. Sorry. So I couldn't help you out. Sorry. So the review that we did is only as good as the information that we either gather or through interviews. You know, the documentation that we went through was stellar, and the interviews that we had with the staff was fantastic. They're very motivated to share information. They want to do the right thing. They understand where the town is going, and they understand what some of the growth challenges are. So they were able to share a lot of information. So I just wanted to say that as a sort of a hats off to the folks that we interviewed. So we start by looking at the sort of the existing documentation that is there. And all the way from all of the applications that you run from on the desktop to how you're running your facilities to how you're running your accounting systems. We looked at client access, so we had to look at holistically where is everybody trying to access information in the town. Is it at their desk? Is it remote? Is it out at the work site? We started to go through some of the infrastructure inventory. We did an internet usage, so we had to look at all of the different internet connections that you had and how they were being used and how effective that was going to be. We looked at the org chart to see where some of the pockets of how the organization was structured and how information was being shared. We had to look all the way down into sort of the server technology and some of how it was all sort of plugged in and working together, so the nerdy bits. We also had to look at a lot of the business documents. So this was really a look at the business and look at IT and see how IT is supporting business the most effectively. So we started by looking at the website to see how are you structured, how is the information there, what are the departments, what are some of the things that you're doing online, or what are some of the things that you could be doing online. We had to look at the business plan. We had to look at your business case to see where the town was hoping to go in the next 3, 4, 5 years, so that we could make sure that IT has the right support and infrastructure to get you there. We looked through some of the public input. We looked at your YouTube channel. We looked at some of the council agendas and minutes and what are some of the hot topics over the last 2, 3 years. We had to look at some of the forms and applications, so you know, dog licensing, assessment, stuff like that, to see where there's some things that we can do. And then had to look at the map just to see what the topology of the city, the town looked like. So when we were looking at where some of the work sites were, we could come up with some recommendations. So there was a lot of information there to distill. Then we met with the stakeholder group. So these are the great people that we met with that shared with us what they did, what some of the challenges they were up against, how they leveraged IT, how they look to leverage IT in the future, what IT was doing well, what IT could improve on. So it's all the way soup to nuts from the executive office. We met with facilities, we met with public works, we met with finance, you name it. We met with whoever was willing to meet with us, we met with them. So we were down here for two solid days, back-to-backs, just meeting with them. And we asked them current state, we asked them future state. What do they see in their department? What do they want to do? What are they seeing in trends within their areas so that we can start capturing that information so that they can be on the leading edge of where they want to go. And then we met with IT. So as part of the methodology we looked at, we had to look at every service that you would consume as a town, all the way from the applications. We broke it out by business services, so those were sort of the departmental areas. What were they consuming? We looked at sort of the data center that you have, so all of the information that you're gathering and collecting is sitting in a data center within this building. We had to look at some of the items within there. We had a brief look at sort of how you're using print and copy. You know, so when you hit the print button, where does it go? How does it function? All the way down to sort of even the telecom. So there was, you know, in some of the interviews, some people were saying, you know, they're having trouble getting connected from remote sites. So we were able to sort of capture some of that information and sort of build it into a bit of a plan where we could come up with whether it needs to be addressed right away, whether it needs to be addressed within the next 6 months, or whether it's a future thing. You're okay for now, but let's just be aware that in the future you should probably look at that. We had to look at some of the disaster plans that you had, some of the business continuity plans that are out there, and fold that all into our recommendations as far as what should be dealt with right away, what's sort of a midterm thing to look at, and what's a future state. Any questions so far?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
You know?
So when we were meeting with the staff, we did the current state, we did sort of, you know, what was working well, but what did they see, you know, future-wise? So how did it relate to what sort of infrastructure did they need in order to do their business? Did they need more mobile support? Did they need more wireless support? Did they need more remote desktop? Did they need more access to information? So from a network infrastructure, was there anything that hardware-wise needed to be addressed? From a security perspective, you know, where's all the information being housed? Are you happy with security? Do you need more security? How are things working not only with building access, but login information? You know, where are you storing information? Is it secure enough? We looked at all the applications. So we had the application inventory, so we know exactly what's running within your areas to see, are there any applications that are becoming aged that might need to be renewed. You might have to do an RFP in the future to get a new release, or is it patchable, those sorts of things. We had to look at processes and governance and resourcing, kind of all holistically, in the sense that what are some of the processes that are in place, for instance, for, you know, onboarding of a new staff person. What are all the processes that they need to go through? HR is involved, finance is involved, IT is involved from those sorts of things. And they're all well understood processes, but they could probably need a bit of governance wrapped around how all of that is dealt with, and processes. So from our findings, the IT department area, they're currently working at full capacity. They're doing a bang-up job with the number of staff that they have. They're on call when they don't need to be on call. They're working on projects outside of what their current work duties are, and they're at full capacity. So part of our recommendation is, in order to deal with some of the project work that they have, is to build a little bit of a hybrid organization where they can swell, bring a contractor in for a few weeks to help out on a project, and then shrink back again to normal size to be able to do that. And also have staff and the appropriate roles and responsibilities to support them going forward.
I have a question around resourcing capacity, so I guess this is a good place to ask it, which was why I asked if you had experience in the private sector. So I'm curious, for an organization the size of the town of Canmore, it's noted that we have 5 full-time employees. I think we know intuitively, without reading it in the report, that they're working to the max.
Yep.
how does that compare to industry for an organization this size?
Well, I think IT organizations are always sort of working at capacity.
But I mean, in terms of the number of, like, 5 full-time employees, corporation the size of Canmore, is that seem right on par with private sector?
That's about industry standard for a staff perspective, probably by 1 or 2, maybe increase. Because it all comes down to the type of service that you're providing to the organization. So it's not only staff, but it's also citizen-centric. So a lot of the citizen-centric projects that you would have, be them online systems to be able to provide services to them, you need to include the sort of the population of the town into that whole thing as well, and providing those services. So it's in line, but it's probably within 1 or 2, I would say. Yeah, and a lot of organizations do have that hybrid model. So if they do have a project that's coming, that they can swell the ranks and then shrink them back down again.
Thank you.
One of the other ones was from a business engagement perspective is that a lot of the internal departments need to engage IT early in the process of leveraging technologies. Quite often IT is sort of the last or second last to know that either something's been purchased or something's planning on being purchased, or hey, it's here, we need to get it installed by tomorrow, can you come help us? So to build a little bit more collaboration and governance and some other things around how stuff gets put into play. And also fully defining the business requirements. So making sure that IT is engaged when you're doing business requirements for a new application or for a new technology piece, is that they're engaged early so that they can provide some feedback and some input into that whole process. Around the governance side, there needs to be a bit of a governance model in place. So we need to create some policies, procedures, and some accountability frameworks in how everything is governed within IT, which includes change management. So anytime there's an upgrade to a software, let's make it a project so that you can have some change management, you can have the proper training defined, you can have a rollout strategy, you can have all of those bits and pieces, and it's rolled out in an effective way. So right now, from a network and infrastructure and security perspective, there's few concerns that were identified in the report, but IT already has projects in play to resolve those. One being the server room move from the floor, bottom floor to the top floor to prevent issues with any future flooding. Not going to happen. Yeah. So from a recommendations perspective, prioritize. We did some initial prioritization we did some initial itemization within the report, but it comes down to what are the priorities for the city. So go through the recommendations and come up with a prioritized list of what needs to be done. Need to create a roadmap on how they're going to get done. So, a 3, 6, 9, 12-month roadmap on how these projects can be implemented to resolve some of the issues. IT strategic plan, that's a critical one in order to align it to the business plan of the town, making sure that they're aligned with where you need to go. Resolve some of the resourcing and capacity issues. So a bit of a capacity assessment. You asked if it was in line with what other jurisdictions have. I think based upon, the capacity assessment that we did as part of this, that they were at capacity. But as more projects come on and as you start adding stuff to the roadmap, you might need to swell the ranks through staff as well, not just the hybrid solution. And also develop some service level agreements. So right now with all the different business units, it's all sort of do the best effort in order to support them, either evenings and weekends. So develop some service level agreements, not only internally with IT, with the business areas, but also make sure you've got service level agreements with any external providers. So any of the software providers that are providing your accounting software or anything like that, even around your wide area network through TELUS and Shaw, make sure you've got a service level agreement in there in place. So as far as engaging business is making sure that the businesses are engaged in sort of the IT strategic plan. So it doesn't make any, you lose a lot of value if IT goes away and develops their IT strategic plan in a room without business there. So engage all the business stakeholders and have a bit of a facilitated session on where do they need to go, what are they doing well in servicing the citizens of the town, and what are they not doing well, and how do they come up with leveraging technology to do things better. Governance, planning, and process. That's having a look at, there's two acronyms. There's BCP and DRP. So disaster recovery. A disaster has happened. How do we get all our data back? How do we get stuff working again? Business continuity is, if something really disastrous happened, how do we keep providing business? So making sure that the disaster recovery plan and the business continuity plan are melded together. What we heard during our interviews is a lot of people have different DRPs and business continuity plans, but not necessarily an overarching one that encapsulates all of the business that needs to be done within the town, and make sure they're all aligned and everybody knows what's going to happen if you need to spin that up. From a network and security infrastructure, implement some change management. So right now, through the staffing within the IT department, changes need to go in. They do their best they can with testing it and rolling it out, but really develop some change management and some governance around that. So if something needs to happen within the network, within whether it's software, whether it's hardware that needs to be installed within the infrastructure, is that it goes through a mini project, so that you've got a bit of governance around QA and testing and the rollout. So just tighten up some of the governance and change management that they have already. Questions?
Just on that last presentation, the recommended next steps.
Yep.
In the report, it doesn't indicate whether this is sort of a step-by-step. So do you do resourcing capacity, that job first, and then the next and the next? Or do these...
They can be done in pseudo-independently. What we did is we were able to rank them whether they're critical that they needed to be addressed now, or they were yellow, or they were green, they could be addressed in the future. So a lot of the ones that were red were issues that need to be addressed at this time. Let me just see if I can go back. So these are... The first two are probably the sequential ones. So you want to prioritize, you want to create the roadmap, and probably do the strategic plan, which would give you a good sense as far as how your resourcing and capacity is going to be, and then start tying that in with some of the other projects. So if you're looking for sort of the step-by-step, it would be, the first four to five-ish in that order, and then the other ones can be done at sort of either in parallel or at a later time.
And it doesn't say this, but it appears that there's perhaps a year's worth of work there. Would the expectation be that 2 years worth of work? So we would start here and work all our way through, and at the end of 2 years be all done with the whole shopping list? I
think it depends on what comes out of your strategic plan. And as it aligns with your business plan. So for the next year to 2 years, there's some pent up demand here for some projects that need to be done. Mm-hmm. But based upon what the strategic plan looks like, some of those might change. You might add or remove from there. Okay, and a related question may be best answered by Mr. Ringenbach, but if there's 2 years worth of work here, and we know we're already at capacity, are we going to wait until the 2 years worth of study's been done before we address that capacity issue, or will we be expecting to see some suggestions before that? Anyone?
Sure. We've actually taken some of the cost estimates from the report and included those estimates in our capital budget for 2017-2018. We've split it up over the 2 years, and we've kind of gone forward with the idea that we need to address what we see. Just back up maybe one slide here a second. We need to address initially a roadmap to say what's critical, what do we need to do now, develop the strategic plan, and out of that strategic plan is really going to form what we're going to do next and tie into some of the governance issues and those types of things. How I see this working, given that we are at capacity and we do have other projects that have come forward for 2017, 2018, is that we'll likely have to bring in an external party to perform these functions for us and work with them to do it. And that's the other reason we've split it up between 2 years. So we've started off with the assumption that we'll start developing that strategic plan, building on some of the prerequisites for that, and then in 2018 move into disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning there as well. Does that answer your question?
Yep, pretty much. Thank you. Thank you. And one other question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a point on capacity. When you'd raised the question before, how does the town of Canmore compare to private sector entities? I think it's important to keep in mind that those benchmarks are sometimes a bit of a challenge. When you look at the scope of services that you folks deliver, it's like 20 mini businesses in one. So there's, we've been trying to do this over years, not just in IT staff and capacity, but in all the back office functions, finance, HR, all those pieces like that. And we're finding it a big challenge. Even if you take a private sector entity that has a similar staffing complement and try to say how many finance people, how many HR people in that, it's a real tough one to do. The other piece that I'd point out in the uniqueness of public sector is you folks are never done. In the sense that if you had more capacity, I'm pretty sure you'd have a resident that would come forward with a way to fill that capacity. So it's a bit of a challenging one. It's almost like your budget process. You can't fund everything in your budget process. Mm-hmm. Similarly, you can't do every project in a municipal context. So, you know, you're going to have to weigh that out with the resources available.
Great, thank you. Councillor Stanford, do you have a question?
Yes. I wanted to ask a question, if you could maybe elaborate on the number 13 that we were talking about in the report. Are we there yet, or are we still? There's a suggestion about implementing the SharePoint program that we're doing.
This is in the body of the report?
Yes.
Did you want
Are you
to
able to answer questions
do a
on that?
review of the body of the report
Yeah.
before questions, or?
Oh,
So we can answer some questions. Sure. Do you have any more questions about the presentation at this point, or?
are you going to go through the report point by point? Is that
No.
the plan? No,
No.
okay.
No,
So-
we weren't planning on it.
Yeah, so there was just a question about number 13. And I'm not understanding what the recommendation is for implementing the current project that we have on the go. It's the,
What it is, it's around, there's already a records management project in play. There are lots of questions around trying to gather information, and their records are stored in multiple locations. Some of it's printed, some of it's electronic. There's already a project underway that's going to leverage technology called SharePoint, which will allow access to that information. And this was put in there to say, yeah, you need to keep moving this project forward because it's becoming critical. If other projects come in and are deemed more critical, this one, we could move it to yellow, but right now we're keeping it as a critical one because it came up multiple times in meeting with people that it's just really hard to find some information sometimes.
oh, okay. I just thought from the description that you were suggesting we put that project on hold, but
Only
that's
if
not what
there
you were
was other
suggesting.
critical ones that were deemed more important than this.
Okay.
So,
So this is integrating well with the IT requirements that you're looking at overall?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just unclear about that. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
I have one question under your recommended next steps, which is probably obvious, but I'm asking it anyways. So it seems going through all of the lists, and you have estimated pricing sort of based on number of weeks. And overall, it works out to $4,000 or $5,000 a week for each of those steps, except for the third one. It's twice as expensive. So what is there about that work, developing an IT strat plan, that creates a significantly more expensive process?
It's additional resources, so it's not just one, it wouldn't be just one person. It
So
would be
everything else would be done by one
or two
person?
people, yeah.
And
And
that
then
would
this
be-
one has more stakeholder engagement. So it would be getting into a room, running facilitated sessions, probably moving them from station to station and really getting them to share a lot of information. So it's a bit more hands-on FaceTime meeting type stuff, which is the most effective way to do those.
Great.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's other questions at this time. Councillor Comfort?
I just wondered, we're looking at the possibility of broadband, municipal broadband.
Right.
So that kind of a project, that seems like a big thing to implement. So would that not require more resources beyond what you've flagged in here?
That would be, it wasn't necessarily flagged as a real live project at this point, so it was not really brought into the recommendations, but if it becomes the #1 priority for the town to do that, then something else would have to fall off of their plate in order to help out with that, or they would need to swell their organization
Okay,
further.
and then the other question I have is about contractors, I guess. So for example, one of the items that you mentioned, give me a second. So the IT department has 5 full-time employees, relatively flat structure, and numerous responsibilities, including, and then website support and maintenance is one.
Mhm.
Is that one that might not be considered for contracting? And would the strat plan then, and maybe Alan could answer this better, would the strat plan be then playing with those ideas to sort of see how feasible that kind of thing is? Well, actually, there is a service that we can contract, and we can do it better and save money and free up an employee's time.
That would be part of the, can I start off? That would be part of the starting, is to see what roles and responsibilities can be done. Can they be done remotely by a contractor? You mentioned sort of website. A lot of that is going to be chasing content, because a website's only as strong as its content, right? And that's always the hardest part, is writing content. It's very easy to create a structure and to create menus and drop downs and those sorts of things, but it's all about the content. So, you know, we would probably have a look at what the true roles and responsibilities are of that role, to make sure that it aligns properly with contracting that out.
And I guess what I'm getting at is, would that strategic planning then allow the opportunity for our IT department to have a more thorough look than they have been able to in the past?
Very much so.
Is that, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything? Okay.
Councillor Cressy?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks for coming and sharing this information with us today. My question is about the sample IT governance, and specifically with regards to Appendix D, which is page 31 of the report. I was just wondering, with regards to IT governance, what role would you foresee council taking? I was curious about the position with the dotted line through the chair to council. Thought it might have been council with a dotted line to the executive office, and once we approve a budget, it's up to the committee to implement.
And I think what it was intended for is to either have council or members of council as part of either the steering committee or of the overall governance committee, if there's a need. Some organizations would welcome that, and some not. Whether it fits in here, we don't know. We used it other places where we've had select members from council sit on the governance committee to ensure alignment with strategic direction of where we're going, and to provide some guidance and some business input into the whole governance structure. So it's an optional thing.
Council providing IT advice?
Or at least whether, you know, the governance is
Usually the information flows the other way.
so it's purely optional. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'll dive in. I think part of what Tony's suggesting is council is another customer department of the IT services.
Okay.
Just like you don't run any council suite, I don't believe, although you are webcasting. I'm not sure. Sorry, I just cringed back there when you said that. I'm not sure you want members of council tinkering in the server room.
Yeah.
But predominantly, I've worked with councils where we had to tell councillors they couldn't drive the grader anymore. So this isn't outlandish. This isn't all that outlandish. But I think the premise of governance is to make sure that there's a business lens being applied to IT decision-making. And so through that vein, I think council would have a role conveying their business decisions and the ongoing vision and direction for the
So
municipality.
what I'm hearing is that council would be kept in the communication loop, and any concerns or interests that they have would be considered as part of the overall mix.
Similar to any other business aspect of the municipality. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had another question. There's a reference to off-hour support.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering how much of the organization relies on off-hour support? Is it specific departments or?
You want to take that one? Yeah.
Good question, and it's something that's increasing. We have a number of departments that are operating longer hours through weekends, starting at 6 a.m. and going to 9 p.m. Recreation, for example. As they move on, they become more and more automated. We're also in the presentation of online services projects, and when we build online services, we have transactions happening in the middle of the night now. So there is a need for a level of support. We haven't fully determined what that is. We're kind of providing that on an as-needed basis right now and just dealing with it, but we may need to formalize that as time goes on, especially in the case of recreation on the weekends or a long weekend. Elevation Place was open all weekend. We only had one small issue that came out of this past weekend, but there are calls. So there is somewhat of a need of off-hour support.
And it's mostly recreation.
Mostly recreation at this time. There's also some facilities issues. There can be perhaps counselors at AUMA meetings that can't access their email, for examples. There could be council meetings happening in the off hours where we have issues that we need to address. So there are things that happen outside of the regular 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday work days, and we typically respond as best we can, but we probably need to formalize that in the future.
Good, thank you very much.
Ms. DeSoto? You were there a second ago. Yep.
There we go. I was only going to suggest that it support Alan's comment about it becoming more prevalent. More and more our operations are growing outside of the traditional 9 to 5 workday. So it's not just recreation, it's solid waste services, which now, fully operational 364 days a year. Our fire department, bylaw services, and all of those departments have need for support at some point in after hours.
Councillor Crowsert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was my question actually went to this overall report, and is perhaps best asked by or answered by administration, and that is often when we get reports like this, we'd be asked to approve them for planning purposes, but we're just receiving it in committee of the whole today. Is that because it's all capital projects, and ultimately, if they're going to be approved, they'd be approved in the budget? Is that the reason we're not being asked to approve it for planning purposes, or what's the thinking behind that?
The thinking is that it was strictly an internal health check, and it's meant for administration, really. We wanted council to be aware that we're undertaking these internal department reviews to support, our commitment to organizational effectiveness. So it's important that administration has this information, so then we can propose any changes, and that would be through budget processes. Yeah.
Okay.
Is there any other questions this time? Seeing none, thank you all for a presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to watching this play out over the next couple of years.
Thank you.
That will move to item D2, the Waste and Recyclable Bylaw Education and Enforcement Plan Update. Okay, we got 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Gentlemen? I'm not gonna. I see this communications leading this show. No, it isn't. Public Works.
Good afternoon, Mayor Borman and Council. So back in August, we passed the Recyclables and Waste Disposal Bylaw. During that meeting, there was a motions for presentations of communication and enforcement plans. So we're here today with Adam Robertson from Communication and Michael Orr from Bylaw to present the ongoing work that's happening around those two things. So there's two notable and impactful changes that we'll speak to today. And the main, I guess both are the prohibition of recyclables in the garbage, and then secondly, all waste containers needing to be animal proof. So first, we're going to have Adam speak to our communication and education plan.
Good afternoon. Here to speak to the communication plan around this. So we split it into two portions. One's a general campaign for all residents in the community, and the second is a little bit more specific to the businesses that need to replace the containers. So first, I'll speak to the general one. So some of the things that we plan on doing are rerunning the I Recycle Because campaign, which we just started last year. So that ran one time. It's a series of 6 ads. You can see an example there. Where we used some notable people in the community, and they all came up with why recycling is important to them. So we're going to change the messaging a little bit just to reflect the changes to the new bylaw, and we'll run this campaign again starting in December, so around the Christmas season when waste and recycling is increased. And we'll have that on the website and on social media as well. The second thing we're going to do is update some of the magnets that are on the garbage bins. So again, that's an example right there, the no cardboard. We'll have that updated to display more of the items that shouldn't be in the bins. I believe we have about 20 of these right now that rotate between the bins, and we will print some more of them. We are not going to do every bin simply because of the costs involved, but I know that Mr. Robbins and his team make sure they go on kind of the higher profile bins. The third thing is we're always doing ongoing messaging on the town page when we have space and social media around various recycling programs, so some of the specific programs that we have. So again, we'll update some of those messages to reflect the changes to the bylaw. We're also going to do some changes in the community guide, so there's always a section on recycling and waste in there, so we'll update that to reflect the new changes. And we're going to do an e-news campaign with some of the similar messaging, and we're talking about planning a lunch and learn that would be around what can go in the recycling and the best way to do that. The date and time is to be determined for that still. So that's the plan for communication in the community in general. And the second part is targeted to the impacted businesses that need the new animal-proof waste containers. So we'll do a letter and an in-person visit to the impacted businesses, explaining why they need to install the new animal-proof containers and why it's important. And then a second piece to that is that there's an opportunity to do some more targeted communication to business sectors seasonally that sometimes might need a little bit of education about where recyclables are supposed to go. So the first one we identified is some landscape companies in the spring and summer. So the solid waste services team finds leaf and grass waste in the bins quite often. So I think in the spring that we'll try to reach out to those companies and just educate them on where that should go. And others as they arise. There's no other specific examples that we have right now, but we'll keep an eye on it. And Mr. Orr is going to speak to the enforcement plan.
Good afternoon. Well, we're not going to be reinventing the wheel here. The enforcement plan is going to be based primarily on reported concerns. And during our regular proactive patrols, we'll do education and enforcement if violations are encountered. The reason we're not going to be going out and doing a high level of patrols specifically relating to recycling and waste is we don't think it'll encourage positive compliance if people are, looking over their shoulder as they're doing their waste disposal. And as well with that, the numbers of tickets and warnings over the past 3 years, as you can see, and this is all waste-related warnings and tickets are quite low, so there hasn't been any major issues. Anecdotally, I can think of a couple of incidents over the past year where this bylaw this new section regarding recycling would have been very helpful. And normally those were ongoing issues where there was someone continually not recycling, their neighbors noticing, and that's where we'll be focusing on when it comes to the residential side of things. When it comes to the commercial plan, as Mr. Robertson said, there's a plan to issue a letter to all the businesses that are requiring to comply with the animal-proof bins. They're going to be given 3 months. If there's a check-in after that 3 months and they haven't complied, Bylaw Services will then become involved, and we will be sending a warning with a letter to comply, and we'll likely give another month. And if we don't see a plan and we don't see any level of compliance, then enforcement action can be taken. We do understand that there is financial impact on switching to bear-proof bins, so we're trying to give people reasonable timelines and give them as much warning and education as possible so they can do that. Otherwise, when it comes to enforcement with the commercial sector, it's going to be mainly based on reported concerns as well. If there's blatant disregard for the law and we happen to see it, we will enforce it. But again, we're not going to be going and checking every business's bins out back on a regular basis. Is there any questions on the enforcement piece?
That's a very good question. Are there any questions? I see none. Thank you for, what? Oh, okay, he's not lighting up the board. Where'd the IT go? Councillor Crusher.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for the presentation. Given that these was in response to council motions, it would be great if we could have this in writing. Could we have this forwarded to us then, and this presentation, so we have this information on hand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming today to give us that information. Appreciate that. Look good. Oh, Councillor McCallum has something.
I just had a question. When we send out the notices to the handful of businesses that still haven't jumped on board, will we be giving them an idea as to where they can, like, I have no idea where I would buy a bear-proof bin. Will there be an idea as to where they'd be able to purchase such an item?
We can give them suggestions on the suppliers we use.
Okay.
Definitely interaction.
Perfect. And will that be something that we supply for them right off the hop, or are we going to wait for them to ask?
It was going to be in the letter.
Okay.
And when I meet in person, they'd have that chance to ask as well.
All right. Thanks a lot very much.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Fish just slipped out of the room, I see, so moving on to item D3, but shall we wait? Find him. Send bylaw after. Pardon me? D3, Three Sisters Community Lands Update, Mr. Fish.
My apologies, I was anticipating a little more time.
Yeah,
to
well.
switch that over.
Yeah, gotta get up a little earlier to catch us out.
So, community lands in Three Sisters. This issue originally came up through the master bylaw and settlement agreement. There are a number of road allowances that crisscross the Three Sisters lands, and those were essentially needed for logical development. Because of the landscape there, it wasn't going to directly follow the pattern that the original roads were laid out in, which was part of the original zone, land use, sorry, part of the original survey for the province of Alberta. Those lands were agreed to be exchanged, so effectively closed by the town of Canmore and given to the developer in exchange for an equivalent amount of quote-unquote community lands. So there were very little restrictions that were required or that were put on what that land could be used for by the municipality. So this is basically an update on the current accounting for those lands. And if you give me one moment, I just want to show you a couple of maps. My apologies here. I just want to show you the lands. Okay. So at the original, I'll back up a little bit. At the original master bylaw, time it was anticipated that there would be about 30 acres of community lands provided by the town to the developer, and that would be exchanged. The settlement agreement had a bunch of details on, as I explained earlier, there would be developable land needed by Three Sisters. They would be given by the town to the developer in exchange for land that was serviced, and the town would pay their share. So this is the map that I wanted to show you initially to understand where those road right-of-ways are, and they're basically between cross sections. This highlights many of the road right-of-ways in the Three Sisters area. We're unsure of exactly what the original 30 acres or 12 hectares, I'm going to switch into hectares, what exactly that was. We tried to come up with an estimate of it. I was being sort of overly, well, I was trying to include a whole, I thought it would be difficult to get to 12 hectares, so I was including a whole bunch of land. In this map, we ended up with 18 hectares that was anticipated to be closed. So this is an overestimation. Trying to understand where those are when you zoom in a little bit more, and this is helpful because it highlights, so there's a piece that runs through the Three Sisters Tipple Wildlife Corridor here, north of the parkway, and there's a piece that runs south through the resort center and unfinished golf course area. You can also see this long piece running east-west. So in places roads have followed it. You can see where the parkway follows it there, as well as part of Wilson Way, both on that end and at that end. So in those situations, those road allowances weren't closed or given to the developer. Instead, they were just road allowance that was incorporated in as road allowance. So what has been given to the town, that should be what has been given to Three Sisters. So this is a map from the 2004 area structure plan, and I appreciate that it's at a scale that is virtually illegible. So what has been given to Three Sisters? So this is an example of, this is that north-south road right-of-way that predated the development. So the gold sections were transferred to Three Sisters. The yellow section was also, this entire piece that's multicolored was closed and transferred to Three Sisters. Now what has happened is that some of it has been deemed to be has been deemed developable, and an exchange has occurred. Some of it, like this pink piece at the very bottom, is actually within a wildlife corridor, so it was not deemed developable, and so they did not have to give us a corresponding amount of land for that piece. Some of it as well, a strip of this yellow through here, under which is now the disc golf course in the Three Sisters area, and that was, when it was provided as part of the subdivision, it was provided at 50% credit for AMR. So there was a feeling that, in fairness, if we only gave them 50% credit, we would only expect a 50% per hectare calculation of community land for that. So that's significant, and I sort of have to switch back to this high-level map, and I know it's difficult to read, but there are large areas further east in Three Sisters and Smith Creek, so there's a suggestion that there will be quite a bit of land forthcoming in the Smith Creek area. Current discussions are that a fair bit of this land, approximately half, could end up being designated as wildlife corridor. therefore not developable, therefore we would not get a corresponding amount of land provided to us. Also, in 2004, this map included a portion of land that was closed and given to previous owners of Thunderstone Quarry. That land is outside the NRCB decision and wasn't part of the settlement agreement. So the current representatives of Thunderstone Quarries have suggested to us quite clearly that this is not part of the community lands discussion. It wasn't part of the master bylaw or the settlement agreement. So where does that leave us today? The calculations are currently in the staff report, basically saying that the yellow, gold, and pink area in this map, combined with a section of blue, which I don't have an image of, it's part of the Stewart Creek Phase 3 subdivision, sort of just on the edge of the wildlife corridor there. Those have been transferred to Three Sisters, and that total is 2.91 hectares. In exchange from Three Sisters, the town has received, I believe it was back in 2001, this sort of golden parcel here, which currently houses Mountain Haven Co-op, Coyote Ridge, and MacArthur Place. So all three of those developments are on that one parcel there. Additionally, there was an agreement between the town and Three Sisters for the Mineside Court development. Three Sisters bought that land from the town at market value and constructed the Mineside Court development and provided to the town 17 units of perpetually affordable housing, or provided to CCHC. I can't actually remember. I want to say it was around 0.5 or 0.8 hectares. I can check that calculation. Was provided to the town. So although land wasn't provided in that case, we actually got a built form with units constructed that was very helpful. So that math works out to 2.728 hectares. All that to say that the town is still owed 0.182 hectare, and there is a site in Three Sisters, in Stewart Creek Phase 3 that is 0.182 hectares that is anticipated to be given to the town as community lands. So the intent of this update to council is just to bring you up to speed on the community lands issue. And at this point, Three Sisters has asked us to sort of sign a letter saying that this is where the current math is at. And after the transfer of that final piece, the balance will effectively be at zero for community lands at this time. In the future, as lands are closed and needed by the developer, as road right-of-ways are closed and exchanged, then we would get other land back. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Whew. Clear as mud, thank you. So when we talk about future possible lands, we're really talking pretty much exclusively around Smith Creek?
Almost certainly, yes.
Yeah. And on the map, this map that shows Smith Creek in a slightly better detail, is that red, the roadways that are marked in red, the open government road allowance of 5 hectares, that's part of what may be ultimately exchanged, that red line, those red lines?
Yes, that's correct.
And the purple, at the east end of that, are already owned by Three Sisters. Is that the road you described as being associated to Thunderstone roadway?
Yes, that's correct. So the red area of 5 hectares there. So I think there's two pieces, is that I think it's current discussions and current plans or drafts of plans have suggested that at least half of that would be become wildlife corridor to the south. Additionally, the red road right-of-way here is adjacent to some very steep land, so it could be that not all of that will be developable. The final piece you asked about was the purple area. which is here. And so that's the area that is part of the Thunderstone quarry holding. I guess the other piece, if I can just bring you back to the red area there, and then flip back to the previous map. Right at the western edge of the unfinished golf course is another piece of road right-of-way that abuts the wildlife corridor there. Now the golf course ends just before the road right-of-way. So the road right-of-way is effectively undeveloped at this time and is still a road right-of-way. So it hasn't been needed for the development and is effectively land that we're not getting to develop upon. So I just raised that as an issue, thinking back to the last red area on the other side, where development adjacent to a steep slope or a wildlife corridor, if it's not desirable to be developed, then we just wouldn't get any land in exchange for that. Sorry, I took that opportunity to add a little bit, but hopefully bring a little more clarity to it.
Councillor Cuthbert?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Fish. Just to clarify, though, on your answer to Mayor Borman's question about the 5 hectares, and you did mention that half of that may be not developable because it will be potentially a wildlife corridor. Really, what is shown there is the maximum possible, but we won't know until we know as to exactly which lands may fall within what would be developable, and then the calculation is done at that time.
Correct.
Right, so
yes.
In all likelihood, it won't be 5 hectares. It will be something less.
I'd be surprised if it was 2 hectares.
Yeah, exactly, quite a bit less.
Yes.
And so there's a few things I just wanted to highlight to be perfectly clear on. This is not a gift of land from the developer. This is an exchange of land for road right-of-way. And it's an equal amount of land, which serves both parties because the developer then doesn't have to avoid development on what was the road right-of-way, and the town then is able to get a piece of land that they can actually use as opposed to the road right-of-ways that they wouldn't have been able to develop on, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And we've heard this often through correspondence and through public hearings. There's a misunderstanding that the settlement agreement promised 30 acres of land. And I just want to underline that what I'm reading and my interpretation of the settlement agreement and what you've said is that's a misinterpretation of that clause. It says up to, and it's based on what is actually transferred. Based on the, so it's a misinterpretation of the clause and also a misunderstanding of the process, correct?
So I think the confusion comes from the master bylaw DC 198 because that states, sorry, Ms. Hyde, do you mind switching back to the presentation? The land use district says that 12.1 hectares or 30 acres shall be provided to the town. Now the settlement agreement specifically states that it brings clarity to section G13 of the master bylaw. Section G13 has since changed its numbering, but this is the clause that it's referring to. In the settlement agreement, which is attached to the staff report there's quite a bit more detail on what the premise of that exchange is. And it is premised on an exchange, not a quote-unquote gift of 30 acres.
Right, right.
So on that point, if I can interrupt, why would why would the town have been so specific about the number of acres stated in a bylaw, understanding that there was anything but definite? Why would you put such a specific number in a bylaw?
Well, I think it's difficult to say with a high degree of certainty. I'm just speculating on the conversations from 1998 and around that time. It does state approximately 30 acres or 12.1 hectares. Since that time, there has been an evolving conversation on wildlife corridors, and less land has been developable than previously anticipated, I believe, on the developer's side. So some of that land that has been gained for wildlife conservation purposes has been sort of lost for community land. So I think it's largely due to the evolving nature of discussions around wildlife corridors, but also on the actual utility of that land not all being required.
And so doesn't the land use bylaw, though, premise it on an exchange for road allowance?
The land use bylaw says what is written right on the screen right now.
Yeah.
There is one additional clause
Yeah.
that talks about where the community land, it says community land may be distributed among site 2A, 2B, 3, and or site 7 in a form and location to be determined at the conceptual scheme of subdivision stage or area structure plan stage. So, but it doesn't talk about the mechanism of the exchange. And so that's where the settlement agreement, the very first part of the settlement agreement states it is intended to bring clarity to the master bylaw.
Right, they have to be read together.
That's my interpretation, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So from your report, the total credited to date is somewhere around 6 acres.
3 hectares, a little less than 3 hectares.
Yeah, call it 6 acres-ish, more or less 6 acres. I think in acres, sorry. And they, you know, that the reality is there's not a significant amount of community land expected. You don't want to put a number to that, but we're talking about some part of that red road on this map, which totals 12 acres, but if even half of it was exchanged, that would only be another 6 acres. Right. Okay. Are there other questions at this time? Seeing none? Thanks very much for, I know this has been a lot of work for you to dig into ancient history and try and figure this out, and I think it's important. Councillor McCallum.
Actually, sorry, Mr. Fish. So at the time of these agreements, the community lands, they were intended for affordable housing, correct? Was that or was it just community lands to do with what we wanted to do with?
I haven't found anything that specifically limits it to affordable housing. That's certainly been the greatest need. I haven't seen anything that said if we chose to build soccer fields instead of affordable housing, that there would be a limitation on that.
Right. So, inclusionary zoning. If inclusionary zoning were to be permitted through the provincial government prior to the approval of the Smith Creek ASP, what kind of powers would that give us in terms of planning for more, like inclusionary zoning doesn't give us housing. It allows us the opportunity to ask a developer to make space for housing, correct?
So we're just speculating.
Yeah.
So we don't know. There's a number of different forms of inclusionary zoning in other jurisdictions, and so what it might look like in Alberta would just be guessing at this point. So,
But that's another common misconception about inclusionary zoning, that it forces a developer to hand over land or units, when really what it does is asks the developer to make space. It's density bonusing in the favor of the municipality, correct? In some jurisdictions.
Might be, but
yeah.
We don't know what
We
it's gonna,
don't
we
know
don't know
what it's
what the
gonna
Made
look
in
like.
Alberta solution might
That's
look
right.
like, okay?
Yeah.
But that's what it looks like in other jurisdictions.
In some, I think there's a variety where in some cases there's land provided, in some cases there may be units provided, but there are no free units provided. There is still a cost associated with them.
Of course. Okay, thank you.
There are no other questions then? In which case, thank Mr. Fish. We move on to item E1, council updates. Any questions for my report? Councillor Seeley, I have a question. Your SCAB, you note there was an appeal against a refusal, but you didn't note what the result of the appeal was. So what was the ruling on that?
Voted in favor of the applicant, so it was accepted.
So the appeal was accepted?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Seeley or any of the other council reports? Councillor Comfort?
I had sent mine in, excuse me, an electronic copy, rather late, and in the agenda it says that I'm going to do an oral report. I'm not going to do that, but I did want to note that I did attend the raising of the pride flag at Canmore Collegiate High School, and to note that there was a similar raising at the same time at the Banff Community High School, and that represents the culmination of and success of a number of years of writing policy at the school board level, and kudos for the school board for that good work.
Great, thank you. Councillor Crowsett?
Your Worship, I just wanted to bring to Council's attention that in my report in Section A, it's on page 50 of our agenda package, the bullet that deals with numbers for the Canmore Banff Regional, it says 302,150 riders for 2015. That should be 2016.
Kind of figured that, thank you.
Well, then you were correct.
I
You
was
win the
gonna
prize.
ask.
You win a prize.
I was going to, and the bullet above that, don't have a question, just that yappy yahoo, November 1st, that's great.
Yes, the plan is, I mean, there are invitations to be sent out, but there will be a ribbon cutting ceremony of sorts within the hour leading up to noon, and then the bus will leave on its regular route as of noon on November 1st from the downtown area.
Great. And I can say that there's a lot of excitement in town. On the mayor's Facebook page, I posted something about transit, and I've never seen so much response to a posting. I mean, hundreds of people doing the like and comments and sharing as people are pumped, primed, ready to go. And are there any other questions for any of the other councillors? See none, move to service area reports then. Item. Did you push a button? Because it's not showing up. Oh, Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I was listed as presenting a verbal report. I have sent hard copy about 8 seconds ago out to everyone, but I wondered if I could just touch on a couple of quick highlights. There were a few really neat things have happened. There'll be a press release coming out in papers this week about the new building to be under construction underway at the Francis Cook landfill. After all the damage and all the headaches that we've had, the project is underway. The project managers are in on it. The contractors are, everyone's just going full speed ahead, and it's a pretty successful, it's looking to be a very successful and state-of-the-art project. Further, with the Waste Management Commission, some board members and the CAO attended the Recycling Council of Alberta conference in Jasper 2 weeks ago with some really strong, it was just a fantastic learning conference. And one really positive takeaway is that the rest of the province is looking at all the success of the programming in the Bow Valley. Banff, Canmore, and the MD through the commission are doing some pretty fantastic stuff according to everyone else. Heliport Monitoring Committee is business as usual. We're dealing with the one complaint that's underway and no updates on that one. Planning Commission, we had a recent hearing to approve some minor variances for a triplex that's about to start on Rundle Drive, just couple doors down from your place.
My old place.
And there's a hearing tomorrow for a rental project on Bow Valley Trail, which should be approved. And the last two highlight things, the library board has almost completed their full policy review. These folks in the last year have completely rewritten the majority of their policy stuff. I believe there's three to be done before they've had a full and complete update of their policy program, which was pretty exciting. And another little new adventure we had, due to a grant provided to the Marigold Library Foundation, the board voted in favor of following the direction with the grant, which is to remove the differential fee structure that was in place for our neighbors from the Stoney Reserve. Up until the last board meeting, they were required, anyone from Morley or coming in was required to pay an out-of-town user fee, which was about $50 higher than the local folks. Now they've been brought down, thanks to that grant, to the same value as the local folks, which was a real nice step forward. And last but not least, you guys are likely all aware of it, but with all the transition in the assessment end of the world, they've cleaned off what were over 20 hearings, and there will be no hearings this year. So very, very good success over there with the tax folks.
Beauty.
Thanks.
Any questions around those items? Okay, we'll move on to service area reports then. CAO's office. Municipal services. Councillor Comfort.
So I had a question on, oh no, it was from financial services?
Municipal services.
Just before that.
Okay, sure.
So we're going to have a deficit for municipal tax revenue because of the successful property assessment appeals. I just wondered, is there a plan to compensate for that, mitigate that, or is that to be determined, that budget?
So there is no, there's no ability to transfer that amount to other taxpayers because assessments have gone out and the amount of tax to be collected. So that will just result in a reduction to the overall bottom line the town has this year. So no, there is no plan beyond that.
So if there's an operating surplus, it'll be less by that much.
Right. Okay.
Correct.
Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Worship. I had a question about municipal services. Under 1B, there's a reference to partnering with FCSS Banff to create a Bow Valley Food Alliance. Is that significantly different than the food bank, or is it something new?
Thanks.
Connell?
They're both on, it looks like. Thank you. No, that is not anything to do with the food bank. The food banks both operate independently, although the food bank may be at the table. I'm not sure. This is really around food safety and looking at alternatives to ensure that food services and meeting food needs are provided beyond what the food bank does. So it's not an add-on or anything. The food banks still operate and they're independent of the FCSS organizations.
So just, will this be a food-based project or will it be more service-based? Like Food Alliance, is it providing
so
food?
as in providing food?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's not about providing, it's not about serving meals or providing food. It's
Okay.
about food safety and food services, but not, it's not about providing meals to people.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Question under municipal infrastructure planning and development. The note around Three Sisters Stewart Creek deficiencies. So it's good to see that the some of the work that was lacking up there is being done. The second lift of pavement is finally in on Stewart Creek Rise, and I understand that with the receivership, the landowner had all of their obligations along those lines absolved. So, and they're doing some of the, addressing some of the deficiencies from many years past out of the goodness of their heart. The specific questions, and I'd asked Mr. Fark this earlier, and for the public record, the trails that are up in there that are sadly lacking in terms of repair and maintenance, paving, the railing, that's being dealt with as well. Mr. Fish?
Yes, those issues are being resolved. There's a fair bit of infrastructure on private land, including trails on private land. So we're looking at the whole area comprehensively. So some of the post and beam or post and rail fencing that is collapsing, primarily that's on private land. It was done by previous owners of Three Sisters. And until we can resolve some access agreements over those private lands, there's a desire for the developer to maintain those or not at their choice. So we're trying to resolve some of those issues comprehensively around transferring land and access right-of-ways in those areas.
So the developer's been wanting the town to take those lands, and we've been saying not until you repair them, basically.
Yes, there's also a number of these trails and pathways are on private land without access right-of-ways. So it would be a difficult conversation. Arguably, the access could be cut off to those. I don't think it's a debate we want to have. We're working together to address those issues, whereby we can ensure the access, and at that time, some of those amenities may be removed if the town doesn't want to maintain them. So a number of those amenities are at a higher standard than what is everywhere else in town, and could be quite costly to maintain. So in some cases, we're actually asking the developer to take those out where they're not needed for safety reasons or to town standard.
What's the situation, current situation with that dry pond up behind is it Serenity Ridge, the Swan project?
Yes. So we're currently working with the new owners to address that issue. There was some question as to whether or not the original design was a dry or a wet pond. It seems to be referred to as both. It would be quite maintenance intensive to maintain it as a wet pond or create it as a wet pond and have it continue to function that way. So the inclination is that we would probably consider a dry pond, although we're looking at sort of design revisions to that whole MR area that would include that likely as a dry pond.
Okay, that's good to hear. Last conversation I had about that area was some time ago. And it was recognized that as it sits, it's fairly unattractive. And the new landowner, Mr. Ohlenberger, had indicated, and this is shortly after the lands came out of receivership, that they could send over a landscaping crew from Stewart Creek Golf Course and in short order at least make the place, the area, look more attractive, regardless of whether it was, the work was done to make it a wet pond or, as I understand it, the lining doesn't function, so it won't hold water at any time.
I think that's part of it also. The design of it, as I understand it, is that it's the amount of water it would hold would be a very small amount of water, except in storm events. So for the most of the year, it would remain dry. So currently, the new owners are now working on a redesign of that area for the town to review and approve. It's a beautiful day right now. It's pretty chilly, but I don't anticipate there will be a lot of change in that area in the next 6 months. It would probably be next spring before work
So
would be
that-
done there.
That, I don't want to call it promise, but the suggestion that they would send in a landscaping crew and at least make the place look good is still in the maybe list.
Yes, I'm unaware of any commitment at this
I
time
think
to
I
do
have it
that
on voice
in the
recording.
very near future. So it's been complicated by some of the other land transfer issues around municipal reserve and credit given.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Krausert.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Mr. Fish. You may be best to answer this question. It's in relation to the new ASPs that are coming forward, and I recognize there hasn't been a formal application yet, but you note the fees. So has the town, or what's the process for then the town retaining a consultant to provide third-party review? Has that started, or is there another point that's a trigger point since we're coming in midstream on these ones?
No, we are finalizing an RFP, a request for proposals, to go out to potential consultants. We hope to have that out by the end of the week.
Great.
To review certainly the proposed resort center amendment.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the Smith Creek?
So we have an approved terms of reference and the working together guidelines. They didn't contemplate a third-party review. We also do have a new MDP and EIS policy, and the terms of reference does suggest that that ASP process would align with the MDP. So we're in discussions with a little bit with Three Sisters, but really it's a town of Canmore decision to make if we want that third party. We have a report, and we're anticipating to bring that back to council likely on November 1st for consideration. It's depending a little bit on the timeline for potential application on Smith Creek. We don't want to do a bunch of work in advance of that application.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll look forward to hearing, or receiving that on November 1st. Can I ask a couple other questions? These probably won't involve you, Mr. Fish. We'd probably be looking to Mr. Fark. With regards to 2B, the conceptual work for the intersection of Main and 8th initiated, and it says engagement expected over the coming months. What sort of engagement are we looking at there?
So there'll be a combination of targeted stakeholder engagement and some broader community engagement as part of the overall transportation planning that we are doing.
Okay, so there was approval for lights, and it's been previously reported to us that the consultant is suggesting potentially some other ways to go, and so that's what the engagement is about, is to get some feedback around alternatives before coming back to council for...
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. And my last question then is with regards to the Cougar Creek area, in particular the landscaping on the lower portion of Cougar Creek between Elk Run and the highway. It was my previous understanding that this fall there would be work on the trails and completing that landscaping in those areas. Is that still on target for this fall, or is there a different timeline?
I will have to confirm with engineering where that project is at.
Great, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Comfort.
Thank you, Your Worship. So another question for engineering. On the ongoing parking study, two-part question, I guess. How much longer, if you can remind me, how much longer is that pilot study in place there?
So we did not set a definitive end date for the time-restricted parking trial. The intent was to complete the parking study and then use the results from the parking study to inform the next steps.
Okay, and then you say some engagement to take place before completing the draft of the report. So is that looking for public input, or?
Yeah, so there'll be a combination again of stakeholder engagement and some broader public consultation to try to finalize the study.
My sense is there's a few people who want to talk to you out there about that study.
I have a similar sense.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions at this time from members of council? Councillor McCallum.
Thank you, Your Worship.
I was wondering if you could tell me how many people have taken us up on the offer of swapping out a fruit tree for a non-fruit bearing tree. Haha.
Just happened to have that answer.
I believe that number is 23 in the priority 1 areas, and all of that work has been assigned, given to a contractor. So we have received bids, and so we have a contractor who's going to undertake that work. We may look at doing some of the priority 2 areas as well. We're just trying to review.
Do you have a waiting
available
list of
funds.
people on priority 2?
Yes.
Or, oh, excellent. How
Yes.
many on the priority 2 waiting list?
15.
That's all right.
Telling
Excellent.
Mountain Shadows condominium complex is priority 1 and got a tree being replaced.
Excellent.
Good honest citizens.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fish. That's really good news.
Councillor Comfort?
Speaking of trees, it says that we've got 30 new trees going in because of AltaLink having to take trees out in various areas. So I just wondered what species of tree might those be?
Whew. This is stump the panel.
Hopefully,
day.
hopefully non-fruit
Stump
bearing
the
trees.
panel.
I'm going to say crabapple. I don't know. I will have to
It's
confirm
your
that with Parks.
regular sort of tree.
Yes.
That's a good, regular.
Yes, I'm going to guess it's going to be one of the trees indigenous to the area, so it will be a fir or something to that effect.
Could you send me an email so I can let WildSmart know what they are?
I will
They're
confirm.
curious. Thanks. Oh, and I just wondered how the last item on the sports field maintenance, I wondered how the pooper scooper is working out on the football fields and soccer fields.
To date, I have heard no complaints from football players, so I'm going to assume well.
Okay, thank you.
You heard any complaints from the elk? Anybody else want to play stump the panel? Seeing none? Is there anything in regards to the resolution action list? Councillor Comfort?
I just wanted, there appear to be a couple of items that have already been dealt with, and I just wondered how quickly we would get them off the list. Although I do realize we're just into October, so. That would be 164-2013, the review of ESAB. And then the MVP review, 235-2015. I believe that that's done. And I think there was one more, but I believe they've just happened today, so.
Yeah.
Yes, so they stay on, you know, the committee of the whole is only once a month. So they're on here until they actually get a completion date that you see, and then they come off the next month. So anything that's on here with a completion date will come off. If the completion date isn't on, it'll come on next month with the completion date on it,
And then off, yeah.
and then it'll be off.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
So, Councillor McCallum.
I was curious, it says here for request for direction on the employee housing program, and that there will be something coming to council in fall of 2016. Is that still planned?
Didn't get out for a run at lunch today, so I'm really appreciating
Okay.
this back and
You're
forth here.
welcome.
Yes, there is work being done. We have met last week with Canmore Community Housing Corporation, General Manager of Municipal Infrastructure, myself, and 2 others in the Planning Department that have looked at the research, the work that was done in 2011 and again in 2014, and we're going to bring to council, we hope probably in December, some options to move forward. It's a tricky issue.
Mm-hmm. So you had the opportunity to do any stakeholder engagement at all?
We haven't at this point, but that's fully part of our plan. I'm trying to remember the nuance of the discussion. I think the idea was that we were going to bring something perhaps, well, why don't I let
Committee of the
Mr.
whole, and then a decision? Yeah.
Yeah,
Wise, thank you.
okay.
Did you have something?
I was going to try to respond to that question. So the intent is to bring forward to council some ideas and some recommendations, a general idea of what it might look like prior to going into a large-scale community engagement program. We've already done significant community engagement this year, including the Livable Canmore and Everybody Needs a Home campaign. So we are going to actually look at the policy first, have some discussions, and then determine if further engagement is required based on the potential policy implications.
Thank you very much.
Is there any other questions from anybody to anybody at this time? See none, I'll move committee of the whole go in camera. Those in favor? Opposed? We're in camera. Almost.
Does mouse work?
Yeah, it's super.